Hi, I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And I'm Lainey Law, and you're watching Murder Metal Mayhem.
This is Pete Altieri with the Murder Metal Mayhem podcast, and I have the privilege of doing this interview with attorney Andrew Myers and Lainey Law. Andrew has a great channel here on YouTube, and his legal analysis of true crime cases is fascinating. Lainey is here. You bet. Lainey's here, though, to keep him in line, and she's going to have her hands full, but she's going to also add some excellent insight as well. So how's it going, guys?
Pretty good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us on today.
Hey, no problem. No problem. I love doing interviews. I do a lot of them, so enjoying this. I've been really a fan of your channel, legit. So I watched a lot of your videos. So I really almost feel like I know you guys.
Thanks. So
that means a lot.
It's good to know that somebody's out there watching.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, first things first, when I first started watching you guys on YouTube and I saw Lainey Law, I'm like, okay, that's the name of the law firm. And then, since learned that she works with you, Andrew, and I wondered, is that a requirement to work at your firm? Is that your people have to change their last name to Law?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, legally, Andrew actually requires all of us to go through the proceedings to change our last names. No.
Everyone has to go to the probate court, and it cost the legislature increased the cost up to $35 to file a name change petition.
He'll compensate half of that, though. No.
Oh, that's nice.
No, so it started actually when we first started doing the YouTube channel, where he introduces himself. I'm attorney Andrew Myers, and the channel's about Andrew's the legal professional. I'm learning about the law. So that's kind of where that came from, where no, Law's not my legal last name. We did not go to probate court. And I do want to clarify, I am not a law specialist. I am not an attorney. I keep up with pop culture and, the girly pops and gaming and things like that. So I keep Andrew hip and modern,
There you go.
with my hip and modern way of talking.
Well, nothing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say nothing wrong with that.
No, we started doing this podcast, and I envisioned doing a podcast, and I tried a lot of different things, and I consulted with a good friend of mine who's now no longer with us, sadly, Doug Cope, who had worked for WBZ, the big radio station in Boston. He kind of helped me think things through. And the first couple of ones I did were so horrible that I didn't even drop them. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I think I can take care of the content because I had been blogging for years and years and years. But you know what? People just don't read anymore. They just don't. No matter how many experts we got in to do the SEO consulting and IT experts, people just, no matter what we did, people don't read anymore. So I had to do a podcast, and I had to get somebody in to help me so that just, wasn't just horrible, for lack of a better word. And so I found Lainey, and she knows all about, podcasting and tech and electronics. And,
cool.
Before we went on here, you noticed we had a little technical issue. I just stepped aside and she, fixed it. Whereas I probably would have picked up the computer and thrown it in the dumpster. So she's the tech expert and I'm the law person.
And I do want to say I am a computer science student. So with goals to one day become a software engineer. So tech is what I'm really into. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. So speaking of law, Andrew, when did you start practicing law? And you talked about what made you want to do the channel, but what about law? When did you start getting into that?
Oh, good grief. I've been practicing law for 30 years. Before that, I was a TV reporter, and I reported on politics, and I reported on crime, and I reported on just general assignment reporting. But I'd always wanted to go to law school. I go to law school in Boston, and I get out of law school, and so I've been practicing for 30 years.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, that's about how long I've been in my job. It's a long time.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, it really, you look back on it, it's like, wow, 30 years just happened in a snap.
Yeah.
Now, Lainey, we were talking before the interview about this crazy Idaho 4 case, but what is it about that case that you think has just captivated the true crime community, and what do you think makes it so intriguing to people?
I think if I had to guess, one of the biggest reasons that it spread so quickly because it happened on this college campus. And we talk about how before the cops even arrived, that students at this school, like there was and news that like things had been going on. I think that this is one of the first cases that we talk about like Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, but it's interesting seeing a murder case and, quadruple go this big. And I think being on a near college campus and involving college students and involving, what seems like a very social group of college students, you would think that things would be more transparent and it would be easy to get down to what happened, because we're in a point right now where we have Ring doorbells, we have our cell phones, everybody's got like Life 360 on their phone to see where their friends are. You go on Snapchat, you can see where people's locations are. And I think it kind of baffles a lot of people that we have all this technology available, and there's still a lot of people feel like there's holes, and then you have the gag order, so then it's just like people are trying to piece together things themselves. And I think with true crime, that's a significant portion of it, where people want justice. I think people genuinely try to go for what's right, and I think that people just feel kind of pushed out, and I think that it's just something that kind of spread crazy like wildfire because of how it all started.
Yeah, those are all good points. I would agree with that. I think the fact that they were young people, they were attractive. You got kind of the perfect storm here, the mystery surrounding it, the police corruption angle. I mean, I talk about it on here. I mean, it's endless. I mean, with the things you could talk about. And I don't think I've ever seen a case with so many shady characters on the periphery. I mean, it's really unbelievable. I mean, if I'm a writer, and I don't think I could have written something this insane.
Well, yeah, truth always trumps fiction. Can I just add something to something that she said?
Yeah, go ahead.
Everything she said is absolutely true, and I agree with it. But I think what really caught America's attention was, yes, it's for young people. Yes, they were at a university, and a lot of parents have kids at a university. When you send kids off to college, you just want to assume that they're okay. But what I was going to say is that, these crimes happened just before the holidays on November 13th of 2022. And for 6 weeks, the media just every night, there's been no solution to the Idaho 4, Maddie, and, they would name them, they would throw their pictures up on the screen. Every single night for 6 weeks until they caught him the very end of 2022. The networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, all the three-letter, Fox, CNN, every night. So America is, what is going on? What is happening? Then they finally nabbed the guy, and within days, they clamped down this gag order, this non-dissemination order. We're not going to tell you anything. So for 6 weeks, the law enforcement, I'm going to try and be as nice as I can. For 6 weeks, law enforcement held these press conferences where they talked a lot but didn't really say a whole lot. Now they finally have the resolution. They finally have their guy. No, I'm not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you. So America is like built up to a crescendo, and then it just stops. And I think that I've said this before. I'm sure you've heard me say this before, so I won't belabor the point. But I think that the whole idea of gagging and non-disseminating has backfired. And the whole country is just wondering, what is going on? What is happening? So that's my answer. I'm sorry.
And it's also like America's worst nightmare, too, in the sense where, the goal is to get married, have a family, have kids, you have kids. And then it's like it could be anybody where you send your kid away to college. You're already worried about all these, things they're going to experience. It's like high school. It's like bad things are going to happen regardless. You're going to get embarrassed. Like there's already so much to worry about, and now you have to worry about never seeing your kid again, which is a horrifying thought.
Yeah, I agree. That's a true statement. Now, Andrew, one of my legal questions on the issue with the defense in the Idaho 4 asking for discovery repeatedly and not getting it, I mean, isn't that a requirement that they have to do that? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I've watched My Cousin Vinny at least 50 times, and that came up. That came up in My Cousin Vinny. So what's the deal with that?
My favorite was L.A. Law, but that went off years ago, and that kind of dates me. But absolutely, you're absolutely right. Under the case of Brady versus Maryland, many decades ago, the United States Supreme Court said absolutely, if there is exculpatory information that would tend to show that either the defendant was not guilty or that one of the witnesses is a problem and there's impeachment material, the prosecution, the state, absolutely positively has to disclose that, even without a discovery motion. But a lot of times, you want to do a discovery motion. It's fairly standard that you do discovery, you send it out. Are 11 discovery requests a bit excessive? Yeah, of course. So we don't know what's behind that, but yes, absolutely, you're right.
So what are they doing? What's their reason? I mean, for not providing it? I don't understand why you have to go on and on 11, like you said, requests.
Well, as you know, it's all been sealed. It's all been sealed, so we don't know. All I can really do is speculate that the defense attorney has had a really hard time. She's been pushing since last summer to get the IgG, the investigative genetic genealogy information, and the state pushed back and pushed. Whoa, we didn't really use that, and it's not going to be on trial, so we don't have to disclose that. And finally, the judge broke down and said, well, submit it all and I'll decide. So they submitted it all December 1st, and the judge did finally decide, well, you can have a portion of it. So if my only speculation, and I don't know, but my only speculation is that if Ann Taylor had to fight that hard just to get that piece, which isn't even a part of the case, what else does she have to fight over? If you look at the Idaho rule that they cite in every discovery request, they're entitled to documents, test results, the names of experts, the substance of the expert's testimony. So we can only speculate what else besides the DNA the state of Idaho is pushing back on. I mean, what about this video? They knocked down the house. So what about this video? Did they provide some of the video, but not all of the video? And by the way, in a lot of jurisdictions, if you have one of these recreation videos, you've also got to provide in discovery all the raw video. So I am only speculating the number of things that could have been a matter of contention between the prosecution and the state. We don't know. I think 11 discovery requests is a bit excessive, but we don't know what's going on, do we?
Wow, that is just perplexing to me. I just can't believe it. How do you defend against a case where you don't know what the evidence is against your client? That just blows my mind.
Yep.
Now, Lainey, what do you make, and this has just driven me crazy since the moment I found out about this case, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk, and can they be forced to testify in court? I mean, if Bethany has that exculpatory evidence that we hear about, then, why would there even be a question of whether or not she's going to come back? And can they force those two to get up on the witness stand and testify?
Well, they can force them, but one of the things I'm curious about as to whether or not they actually will, because the impression that I'm getting from everything is that they, obviously are surviving victims and they're going through their own experiences as a result of everything. While they can be forced, I'd be curious if they will and how much of any of their involvement would actually be made public, because I think right now, especially with the gag order and everything, a lot is being placed to kind of get them out of the spotlight and be able to turn these two people who were never supposed to be, I mean, maybe one day in their own right, but never really supposed to be known names. They are obviously a pivotal point of this whole case because they were in the house, and a lot of people argue, well, how could they not hear things, or what did they see? And we have this old guy with big bushy eyebrows and stuff like that. So yes, they can be forced, and yes, anything can be made to happen, but I wonder how much, if any of that, we're really going to see. And I wonder, Andrew, what your opinion on this is, because I am kind of under the impression that they're going to try to be pushed back into the shadows as just normal college students and try to get that process on them. I don't know.
Hey, we did a previous podcast in which I cited the law, which might be boring to a lot of people. Under the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution, Article 4, each state must give full faith and credit to the other states. And there are actually statutes in all 50 states, a uniform statute that requires if state A is having a trial and they need a material witness who is now in state B, there's a procedure for state A to send the summons, state B holds a hearing, and if there's a real hardship, they have to work something out. But yes, there's a process under the Constitution and the statutes of all 50 states where a witness can be compelled. And aren't they absolutely material witnesses? I mean, Bethany Funk, the whole timeline, say what you will about the timeline, and there's a lot to say.
Ridiculous.
The timeline is based on her, and then there's all this material about Bethany Funk having exculpatory, evidence. So my answer was that A, yeah, they have to testify, and B, we don't know. Probably be fireworks. I would think that both of them would not want to testify because they're going to both be cross-examined from here to eternity. But that's my answer.
Yeah, I don't know how you can hear somebody talking to a dog upstairs but not hear him getting hacked to death.
Yeah,
with a machete. That's or whatever it was. It was definitely not a.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think it was a K-bar, but it's.
We don't know.
It blows my mind, and they didn't do her Dylan Mortensen any favors by putting that PCA together. That's just the most absurd, unbelievable story I've ever heard. I mean, like, it just doesn't make any logical sense to anybody. So it's interesting. I would definitely love to see them cross-examined about this.
Well, they both have to go on the stand. If I were the prosecution, I would think I would need them. If I were the defense, I would want them. So yeah, they're an integral part of the case. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. I was just getting concerned that I had heard that she didn't want Bethany, being in Nevada, didn't want to come back for that pre-trial hearing and wound up nixing that anyway. But now, Andrew,
there's a lot of things we all don't want to do. There's a lot of things we don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyhow, so
like scrape ice off your windshield.
Exactly.
Us this morning,
that she doesn't want to testify. It's not a factor, and it's. I'm sorry. Go ahead with the next question. We're ready.
No, it's fine. But Andrew, I really liked your video on the DNA of the knife sheath because I like the way you kind of broke it down in simple terms. I've been struggling with that a little bit, and I really like the way you described it because you're also not a DNA expert, so you were able to break it down, I think, in a very understandable way. I really, really like that. But this whole issue with touch DNA, transfer DNA is very, very weak, but unfortunately, a lot of people think when they hear the word DNA, it's rock solid. There's no way you're going to get out of it. But this is not the case, right?
Well, no, we did actually 2 episodes, and I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but in one episode, we cited a learned treatise, because you're right, I'm not a DNA expert, but there are learned treatises peer-reviewed by scientists and experts in DNA, and in it says that, and I cited it in the episode, that touch DNA is an evolving science and it is not reliable. And then in another episode, we cited a Connecticut case. There's actually a couple of Connecticut cases. We cited a Connecticut case in which an assault conviction was overturned in part, but in part on touch DNA. There were other grounds, but the court in that decision, and I cited some of the language, pointed out that touch DNA is not to be relied upon in a conviction, in a criminal conviction, and they went into the details. So you're right, I'm not an expert, but I know enough to go out and find judicial and scientific sources that tell us that the DNA is just not really reliable, and it can't be the basis or the sole basis of a conviction.
Right. And I also saw that I think they say you need at least 500, I may be using the wrong term, markers to be able to say it's legit. And there's only 90 in the sample that they got.
Something like that. Yeah.
So it's blindly guessing. I know that when I first heard they had evidence of his DNA at the scene, I was like, okay, this is done. And I didn't even
we were all like that, Yeah.
And then I started learning more about this transfer DNA, touch DNA thing. And it's like, wow, that's not what people think. I mean, he could have gone to the gas pump and pumped gas, and then somebody went in there after him and pumped gas and then went and did that, you know. Or today I mailed out a Murder Metal Mayhem t-shirt to somebody. I'm putting it in the envelope and I'm thinking, could you imagine if I mailed this to somebody and God forbid something like that were to happen, my DNA could be on their couch.
Absolutely.
Or on their bedspread. And that's scary. I mean, seriously, I mean, that's just, wow. I mean, it is that touchy. So to use the pun, you know, it's,
I had heard that there was a gun and knife show in that area at some point previously. And, you know, I mean, this stuff is out there for people to take a look at. What if he just picked it up? What if he just picked it up and put it down? My stepdaughter, just, I don't know why, she's a good kid. She really is. But she has a fascination with knives and things like that. And one day we were at the beach, and you might know the name of these things. They're used in martial arts. They're round and they're really sharp, and you can fling them at somebody. Yeah,
those Chinese
stars. It wasn't a busy day at the beach, and so the guy behind the counter was, you know, giving her these things, and she was looking at them and touching them and smiling and then giving them back. So now, what if, you know, after she touched them all, somebody bought them and committed a murder with them? Now her DNA is all over the thing.
Yeah.
You know, so we don't know. It's all speculation, but still, it's a valid point.
Yeah, it's really crazy to me.
Yeah.
Now, Lainey, what are your thoughts about the demolition of that house on King Road? I mean, this has been a huge bugaboo with a lot of people, you know, thinking that it's not a good idea before the trial. But I mean, this thing could go on for years. I mean, how long are they supposed to leave this sitting there? So what do you think?
It's pretty loaded. I am on I can empathize with both points. I think that just me as a person, I think that I'm all for encouraging education. And I think that not only is everything, the trial, like, we haven't even started. So I think that it's a little interesting to see that it would have been demolished at all, because you would have thought that it was important for the jury to do a walkthrough. Even beyond that, you know, maybe this is just like a fantastical way of thinking, that unrealistic. But after everything's done with the trial, and, you know, in a ideal universe, we find the killer and things are sorted out and everything is resolved, a part of me wishes, you know, even something like that to be a memorial, a house to be a memorial, but also be used as an education opportunity. But I also understand and empathize with, you know, it's a traumatic event for the school, and a part of me almost feels like it's kind of like sweeping it out under the rug. So I kind of have my bias in that regard, but I also am not in the position to be those students at the school. I don't really know what's going on with that. And at the same time, if you leave it open and you try to use it as like a museum of sorts, even theoretically, to talk and educate about that scenario, there are some people who are overly fascinated, who, you know, want to be copycats and things like that. So at the same time, I can understand why, you know, something like that wouldn't work out. There's infinite reasons not to keep it up, and there's infinite reasons not to tear it down. I think that it's a really big point of contention for good reason. And I think, you know, it's very likely to have very contradicting opinions about that.
Yeah, I agree. Andrew, what do you think? I mean, from a legal standpoint, for the prosecution or the defense, from either side?
I think it was a poor thing for them to do. I mean, from a policy point of view, the university president, Scott Green, said, well, we're going to get rid of this because, you know, we want to move on, and people stop dealing with it. Well, the funny thing is, ever since they demolished the premises, everybody is talking about it every day.
Right.
They can bring in, you know, recreations. They can bring in their LiDAR or representations. They can do all of that. But What if some, and they made precise measurements. Okay, they measured everything, every door frame, every window, every angle. But what if a juror comes up with a question that they haven't anticipated? And you know what? I've tried a bunch of jury cases, and jurors always come up with some query that they need to see. In my 2 jurisdictions, the jurors are allowed to submit questions through the judge, and they always shock us. We think about the elements of the crime, and we think about the logic of it. They'll ask questions you did not foresee, and you want to come up with some kind of an answer, because if you don't, the juror's going to think, oh, the lawyer's hiding something. So what if a juror asks a question that would require a trip back to the property? I think it was a prejudicial and a premature and a devious thing that they did, because what are they hiding? I mean, there's so many people out there that are saying, what are they hiding with all of this hush-hush, the non-dissemination order, not disclosing anything, sealing everything or almost everything, and now they tear the place down? I just don't think it passes the smell test.
Yeah, and you compare it to the Murdaugh trial. I mean, we had 911 tapes. We had 3 or 4 police interviews. We had all kinds of information before, and then there was more unveiled at the trial. But imagine if we had all of that stuff for this. I mean, they did no video of any interrogation of anybody in this case. I mean, I heard one of these characters was cleared over the phone through an attorney. I mean, seriously, I don't understand it. I've never heard anything. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life for this case. I mean, it's
we don't know any of that. We don't know any of that because they've sealed all the discovery and the answers to the discovery. So we don't even know what they have. And I got into a little bit of a disagreement with someone else on the YouTube channels that we don't know what they have. And he was saying, well, we do know what they have and they don't have anything. Well, my feeling is that there's a heck of a lot more to the case, and there's got to be a lot more evidence. And when you were talking about Murdaugh, you forgot the most important thing. Well, not the most important thing. You forgot the Bubba the Dog tape. Remember the Bubba the Dog tape?
That was amazing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what convicted Alex Murdaugh. Not only
you couldn't have written that one any better. One of the victims, a TikTok video on his phone, gets him in the end. Yeah, I agree. And speaking of old Alex Murdaugh, what's the latest with that, Andrew? I know there was a hearing here recently you were talking about.
Well, as you know, a hearing is coming up a week from as we are recording this episode, a 3-day hearing to determine whether Mr. Murdaugh will get a second trial. And Judge Newman, who tried the case, has stepped aside, and the state of South Carolina has appointed a now retired former Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court, Justice Toole, to come in, and she presided over a hearing that didn't really go the way Murdaugh's.
No, she was no nonsense. I kind of liked her, boy. She was not giving him any quarter. It was not a pleasant experience for him.
No, and you could see Murdaugh was not happy. He was sitting there with his head in his hands, and his face was all red. She did 2 really important things. One of which is she said, here's how it's going to go. We're going to have a 3-point test. 1, did Rebecca Hill, the court clerk, have contact with the jurors? 2, was that contact improper? And then 3, was that improper contact part of your jury verdict? Did improper contact by Becky Hill change your verdict? That's the one thing she did that was important. The other thing she did that was really important is she doesn't care about Becky Hill's motives. She was going to write a book, so what? That has nothing to do with it. She's not going to put up with any sideshows. All she cares about was whether there was contact with the jury and whether that contact altered their judgment. And she only cares about the jurors that actually deliberated. The egg lady is out. Other alternatives are out. So you're right. That's a good way of putting it, Pete. There was a real no-nonsense kind of a thing.
Yeah, I was loving it. I was laughing listening to her talk because I knew he was getting so pissed. And and speaking of Becky Hill, Lainey, what do you make of that whole saga? I mean, how dumb. I mean, for her to do some of the stuff she did is like, what were you thinking?
I know. The whole thing about her, it's like you had so many options to just not, that sounds just like you really took every avenue that you could to go the wrong way. And it's interesting because I actually talked with Andrew a little bit before we came on here about whether or not she would have any repercussions from this, because initially because this is all right now, it's about, was the jury tampered with? This isn't necessarily about her and her conduct, but as a result of what happens here, we're going to see is the focus now shifted back to her, depending on what the verdict is. I mean, they're gonna, for anything to really happen to her, they're going to have to prove, I would say, that the jury was tampered with. The whole thing is just a disaster. I mean, Andrew had explained to me before, because I was just like, well, can't she lose her job as a result of this? And it's just like, no, she's an elected official.
Right.
So they would have to, if I'm not mistaken, impeach her, and that they don't have necessarily a set system to be doing anything with that.
Wow.
In the court of public opinion, I think she's got a pretty messy reputation right now.
Wow.
Beyond
her son. I mean, you got all this this
book.
story just doesn't end. I mean, it's just nonstop. It's
chooses violence every turn.
Most attorneys that I know have a really difficult time dealing with this. When I saw the interview that Harpootlian and Griffin did outside of the courthouse back in October, I just couldn't believe it. I was in the middle of working some files in my office. I just watched. I said, what? I have never seen anything like this. When you try a jury verdict, the court clerks are your friends. Sure, you get one every now and then that is not outgoing, but I've never had a problem with a court clerk. The court clerk, they facilitate. They bring the jury in. They take the jury out. They make sure the jury has coffee or tea or water if they have to go to a smoking room or what. That's what they do. And I've just never had a problem like this ever. And most of the attorneys I know that have tried cases have never had a problem like this. So it's an uncomfortable. I've dealt with very professional court clerks and court staff all the way up and down. So it's a really uncomfortable thing to do. And so I don't know any attorneys that really like to talk a whole lot about it, but now we're forced to. And I thought Creighton Waters made a great argument. He had some cases that, of course, Griffin and Harpootlian said were not on point, but Creighton Waters pointed out, it's not nice. We don't like it. It's not great that she had this contact. The case law in South Carolina points out that there's got to have been some kind of a prejudicial effect on the way the jury arrived at the verdict. So I thought he did a great job. I didn't like him initially when I watched the trial for 6 weeks.
I watched every day of it. Yeah, I really liked him.
Sharp guy.
But I'll tell you who I love on that team is the one that closed it. He gave it like I hate to use My Cousin Vinny again, but it reminded me of one of the attorneys in My Cousin Vinny with the accent, but he just lights out. I mean, I thought he pulled it all together and just tied it with a knot, and it was good. It was really
not only that, but he had a really good rapport with the jury.
Yeah.
He wasn't one of these attorneys that stands there and just really
it was great.
He was kind of laid back and talked to them like they were people, and that's a really effective attorney. That's an effective trial attorney that can talk eye to eye with a jury and just kind of relax into the role. So they brought him in. I forget where he wasn't even around, but they brought him in to do that.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
It was.
Now, another crazy case, Andrew, Delphi, Indiana, is such a mess. I mean, I don't even know what to make of this with this judge, and I'm glad that Richard Allen got his attorneys back. I put a video out this morning about that, he got his attorneys back, which is great. But then there's some other stuff that he didn't get. So what's the latest and greatest with Delphi?
Well, I did my homework. I watched your episode this morning, and that was a great episode. And I think you answered your own question, but there are some loose ends in the case. But before we get to the loose ends, I've got to sit back and say, wait a minute. I mean, this case is about, two young girls that were 13 and 14 years old, Libby and Abby, and they just go out for a hike one day back in 2017. So we're talking about 7 years ago. What do their family, their friends, other people think of this? I mean, what a horrible, awful, disgusting thing to happen. And then the judicial system really melts down, which is what's happened. The judicial system in Indiana has just melted down over this case. And I mean, as you correctly reported the attorneys, Bradley, Rosie, and Andrew Baldwin, were reinstated. But Judge Gall is going to stay on the case. The motion to remove her was not allowed. So how must that feel for all parties involved?
Oh my
that the attorneys wanted to bump her, she wanted to bump them, but now they're all stuck together. It's like it's like oil and vinegar. It's like
putting two kids in a room and putting a line down the center of the room and say, you stay on that side and you stay on that side. And they're going to be fighting like cats and dogs in there. It's just going to be the whole trial is going to be a circus. I was hoping, I put it out in my video, that maybe they're going to let her like come up with some kind of medical reason to just leave so she didn't get, you know, axed by the Supreme Court. But I don't know. She just seems like she just doesn't like them, and obviously they don't like her. They don't like
her. No. Now I think you're right. I think there are two possibilities. Either what will happen is that, you know, as you said, she will gracefully bow out of the case. I think the other possibility is that she will come right back in the case and double down on everything that she's done and just rain herd over those two attorneys and just make their lives miserable. But she'll need to watch what she does, because the thing is that if it goes too far, there's always grounds for appeal. I mean, they have every right to bring everything up that they can think of to save their client. But what an awful thing. What an awful thing that, I mean, I've never been forcefully removed from a case like that. Again, like the other thing, it's hard for me to personally relate to these things. It really is.
Yeah, it's really just like Twilight Zone stuff. And speaking of the defendant there, Lainey, Richard Allen, I mean, the way they're keeping him, they described it as like the attorney said they were keeping him like Hannibal Lecter. I mean, that just conjures up all kinds of imagery, but this guy's lost a bunch of weight. He looks like he's not doing very well. I mean, I've never heard of a person awaiting trial being kept at a prison before. This is just really crazy.
Yeah, I think a big significant part of that is also when you think about just how much time has passed in general. I think it's hard for me to even comment on this because and I think a lot of people agree with this, I'm very unhappy with, you know, our prison system. It's just, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help the people that are out of prison. It doesn't do anything for the people that are in there. And I think, you know, it's a little barbaric to put people in a lot of these conditions. A lot of the times we think, oh, these people did something wrong. They deserve to be in these conditions. But I find that inhumane, you know, no matter what somebody does. I think that to have just someone treated like an animal for potentially even up to life, I think is just not really logical. And I think that there's more productive things that people could be doing for society. And I think that it doesn't really make sense to even have people in a system that's going to be treating them poorly, because you're taking resources from taxpayers and putting it to just basically keeping these people in a position where, you know, what happens when, you know, if he's not found guilty, how is he going to return to real life? Even if someone is found guilty, how do you return to real life? And not like, if nobody ever taught you not how to commit crimes, how are you going to be released and be able to be a part of society? Even people who are convicted for 10 years, what do you think is going to happen to this person after 10 years? I think it's a mess for people who are not only in there awaiting trial, but the whole thing, maybe this is just like what people say is just like a millennial Zoomer mindset, but and like I said, it's just like I'm very optimistic for the world, because obviously, you know, some people, they commit a crime and it's just like, why'd you do it? I wanted to. Is just like, how do you even deal with that? But that's a psychological evaluation research opportunity even there. The whole thing, I think it's inhumane. I think that innocent, guilty, or pending, I think that, you know, as much as we don't like someone, isn't the goal to rehabilitate them and make them into someone that is going to recommit that crime? Or if someone is found innocent, why would you even put them through that? I can't imagine being in those circumstances.
I got a friend of mine that's a prison guard down in Texas. We have him on the podcast when we do Texas cases or prison stories or whatever. And he talks about this subject, and he's like, I don't want to live next door to these people if we're keeping them caged up like animals. When they get out, I want them to be a productive member of society. I mean, who wants to live in a society where these people are being let out when they're being treated inhumanely? So I would agree with
it just makes people angrier. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know what the answer is. You know, you got to do something with them. But I mean, Andrew, from an attorney standpoint, they were talking about with Richard Allen having to talk to him from 6 feet away through a slit in the door. I mean, I've never even heard of something. Right. That's ridiculous.
I think the problem, I've met my clients, but they've been incarcerated, and they've always given us some kind of a room. Some prisons, like the county jail, it's a comfortable room, and you sit at a table with nice chairs. When you go to the penitentiary, the state penitentiary, it's not quite as comfortable, but you are allowed to sit down with your file, with your notes, and sit down and talk to them. I think the problem from my research, and I went through the pleadings in the case, and they're pretty bereft of any answers to your question. But from what I heard, what was said in open court was when Mr. Allen was first put to the county jail, they wanted nothing to do with him. They just wanted nothing to do with the guy, so they sent him to the state. And the fellow that is in charge of the prison said, he's a risk. He's a security risk because people that are alleged to have committed crimes against kids, children, girls, are a real security risk. And so that was their excuse for, giving him solitary confinement. If what they say is true, that he was in a little room that was 8 by 12 or something like that, and they keep him shackled. I mean, none of that stuff is believable. But a different county, I believe it's Cass County, was asked if they wanted him. And the jailer said, we don't want him. I mean, he literally just said, we don't want him. If the court requires that we have him, we'll take him. But, it's a person that is alleged to have committed a heinous crime. And so they've got to keep him in solitary confinement. The treatment that's alleged to be occurring is way outside of the norm. And you're absolutely right to circle back to the beginning of this conversation. You're absolutely right. That's totally improper to not allow attorneys to have access to him. Apparently, some papers were dropped off for him to read, and it was found out that they didn't even give him the papers until there was a follow-up phone call to give him the papers, and that's just wrong.
Wow.
It's just wrong. You don't do that.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, Andrew, with YouTube creators, I mean, we get flack from our viewers sometimes saying that we capitalize on the victims of true crime. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, somebody's got to report on it, and the legacy media seems to be almost on its way out, and you got people like us reporting. You're a former reporter, but I mean, somebody like me, I mean, I've never been a reporter, but I'm, doing the best that I can. So what do you think about, that whole argument of you're profiting off of the misery of others?
Lainey Law will verify this. I got into this for totally different reasons, which I kind of went into earlier. I blogged, in order to increase the SEO on my website. I've had a website since the 1990s. And when it became obvious that it's not enough to just have a website, you have to have content, I started blogging in my paralegal, and I spent hours writing and blogging and putting the stuff out there. Then, as I said before, people in this country have stopped reading. It's sad. But I think it's inarguable that people in this country have stopped reading, and no matter what we did, nobody really cared about our blog. So that's why I got into the whole YouTube thing, doing podcasts. And I did it because people told me they were interested in these. I know a lot of people that have long distance drives, hour and a half, 2 in bad weather to get to their jobs. And they like to listen to stuff. They like to listen to various things. And we tried, when we first started doing this, Lainey can tell you this is true. We spent hours preparing civil law podcasts because that's what I do. I am a civil litigator. So we did podcasts on bankruptcy. We did podcasts on driving habits. We did podcasts on rotaries. Do you have rotaries out there and roundabouts? Do you have them?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So we did podcasts on rotaries, roundabouts, horrible driving habits, distracted driving. On a good week, we were lucky to get 100 or 200 viewers. Am I exaggerating?
200 views was exciting.
Yeah, so we just, I just said, I'm wasting my time. Lainey can tell you, I almost quit. I almost said, it ain't worth the trouble. It is not worth the time. It isn't. So I had conversations with several people. And yeah, I'll credit one of my neighbors. We were walking our dogs together one day, and I was bemoaning this. He says, Andy, I thanked him for being so honest, but he just came right. Nobody cares about that. We'll say stuff. Nobody cares about that. He says, try true crime. And this is at the time when Danilo Cavalcante was running around. And so he says, people care about that. Both he and I have Pennsylvania connections. And he said, people care about that. So we did Danilo Cavalcante, and we got more than 200. So I kind of fell into this whole thing. And so we're doing this, we're going along, and, we're actually seeing more and more views. People are getting into it more and more, and I'm having to do more research because the civil stuff I know, bad driving, everybody knows, but the criminal stuff I do have to spend. I've done criminal law. I've done some defense. Then one day along about, we're looking at the analytics, and Lainey is like, "Oh, let's go into the
monetization.
You can get paid for this? I had no clue. I was so naive. I had no clue. But I'll tell you this: I'll only speak for myself. The lights, the cameras, the soundboard. I have spent so much more than I will ever get back. So it's, I mean. I know this is the type of answer that you wanted, that where podcasters are profiting off of it. But you know what? If the courts don't want to give us the information, and if the reporters aren't doing their jobs anymore, which they're not out in Idaho and Washington, somebody's got to do it. So that's my answer. You may not like it, and you may not have been expecting it, but
no, I have no problem. Personally, I
can definitely vouch for him, because it's like, even to this day, like, we've been monetized kind of for like 2 months now. Our monetization journey has been long and hard because technical difficulties, always technical difficulties. But even now to this point, it's just like, however long we've been monetized, Andrew's like, people really get to the point where they can make a living off of this. And I think that I mean, our situation is a little bit unique because Andrew has a background in journalism, and Andrew is a member of his community, and Andrew does get involved with, just like the city and just in being community involvement. And I think that, are there people who are doing it to maliciously profit? Yes, but I think, as you mentioned before, media is kind of going away. And if media goes away, or when media is completely driven by financials, then what are people really going to be consuming? People don't want to consume things that they think are kind of being sold to them. I think that people look for and appreciate authenticity. And I think that Andrew and I feel similarly, where, maybe we don't do everything right. There's kind of social norms on YouTube, when what's good taste, what's bad taste. We've had 1.5 million comments that were being too silly about serious topics. You probably had them yourself. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to create a product that is going to be meaningful to people and gets people interested and gives people kind of what they're looking for. So with the true crime stuff, like, at the end of the day, like, Andrew's like, I want, like, he wants a podcast, we'll do civil law. And it's just like, people weren't interested in that. We want to do what people are interested in, not for monetary gain, but just, if you're going to watch a TV show, you want to watch a TV show that is going to be fun, that's going to make you happy. And I think that people want education, people want information. And I think Andrew has he has his legal background, and I think that's something unique to offer people. And I think there's a kind of a need for that information and education.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, Lainey, I noticed when I look at our analytics for Murder Metal Mayhem, I see about 65% of the viewers are women. What do you make of that? Why are women so driven to true crime?
So I actually had to check our own analytics, and I did see that about 60% of our audience is actually female, and I was shocked to see that. Now, I have a question. How old is your average demographic? Do you know?
I'm showing 45 to 65
Yeah,
years
that's
old
about the same as ours.
is our most common,
So
and the women
I was really
65%.
oh sorry.
No, I was just
Cut you off. No, I was kind of surprised to see that, but I think it makes sense. I think I talked about a little bit before that people kind of have a sense of justice and want to be involved and want to know what's going on. And I think that, you know, as much as this is gonna like a topic of mystery to everybody, it's just like everybody's kind of like, how could somebody do this? How can somebody think this way? Like, what leads to people like that? I think is something more gender neutral. But I think on two fronts as to why it leans more heavily female is how many times have we heard about like the hey girly text, or like you when you're a girl is seeing someone that their friends go and do all their detective work and they find out, their every information that ever happened about the guys. I think that I think girls, for whatever reason, I think that we lean more towards social research. And I think maybe it's because of a more it's females are more encouraged to be empathetic and caring and nurturing. So when something is like gruesome and something is kind of off, it's kind of that nosy trigger is just like, how did this happen? What's going on? I want to know all the details. And I think that plays a part of it. I also think, I'm not entirely sure, I don't know every channel's analytics, but I feel like women, like, I don't know, this is just from my own experience, but I really like the content creators that I watch. And I think that I'm not sure if I feel like guys usually when they're watching something, it's usually like to accomplish a goal. But I think that girls are more likely to watch someone and be like, oh, this person's cool. Like, I kind of, I hope they're doing well. Like, I want to check up with them more, and because they seem like a nice person. So I don't know if that's true. I'm not a psychologist. I didn't even know we had a mostly women audience, even though I tease Andrew sometimes that we're gonna get him his YouTube wifey from the comments.
Well, my wife, we've had this conversation. My wife and I have had this conversation, and she and I were thinking that women like to follow these scary serial killer stories because they know they're safe in their living room watching it on TV as compared to living it in real life. So they enjoy the drama and the story of it, but they're removed from it so they don't feel threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Are they really safe in their living room? Look at Maddie and Kaylee and Xana and
well,
Ethan.
true.
They were in their beds. So you'd like to get safe in your bed at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's actually another
thing that Lainey said, except that I think that true crime just has a fascination. There's just a fascination, and it's not necessarily in the crimes themselves because they're gruesome, they're horrible, they make me just want to shut the computer and say the heck with it. The fascination is in how a good law enforcement puts it all together. I don't know if you watch that show Forensic Files. That's a fascinating show because they go into detail how they can match tire tracks, they can match shoe prints, they can match so I think that's the fascination in how law enforcement can take a hopeless case and somehow put it all together. So maybe that's a guy answer. I don't know.
I also, something you said kind of resonates with me because they don't think that they're safe in their home necessarily. One of the things that, like, it's statistically proven that white women have a higher percentage chance of having a fear of crime, like a fear of violence towards them. So I wonder if, to a degree, instead of like the safety element, if it's more like, oh, this might, like, I might be in a bad situation. Let me learn all these things so I can get myself out of it. Even for me, one of the things is like, if I see a car that's like, I mean, I've had, and I've talked about it on the podcast, situations where it's like, I realize people are watching me and I realize people are following me. And I think that maybe the true crime fascination might be part of that. One of the things that Everywhereville, Evil CJ said on our podcast, he mentioned how with the Idaho 4 house, from the parking lot, you could see right into the glass doors and stuff, and they might not have even realized that somebody had been watching them. We don't know any of this, but that's something that's happened to me where I was being watched and I didn't realize, and someone broke into my apartment at the time. So I think that Yeah, I think women might have a fascination in that regard, where it's just like, where do I have to watch out? Like,
Interesting.
what happened? Yeah.
Interesting. But 2024, Andrew, as we kind of wrap this up, anything you guys have planned with the channel that you wanted to share? Any stories you're following that you wanted to put out and let people know about?
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, you know, the Kohberger case is as captivating as it is. We want to branch out. You know, the Delphi trial is coming up. The case of the little girl that disappeared in Manchester, New Hampshire is coming out. I've actually started to prepare some other stuff. I want to do some kind of evergreen episodes on some people, like I'm ready to go with one on the Green River Killer. I'm ready to go with one on Chad Dorman, who, despite the fact he admitted he did it, he's coming up for trial this summer. I wouldn't mind going back and taking another look at BTK as regards to Brian Kohberger and his teacher, who actually wrote a book about BTK.
Yeah, I interviewed her twice.
Oh, you did? Oh,
Dr. Ramsland. One of the interviews is on our channel. It's just the audio. But yeah, I've interviewed her in 2019 and in 2020.
That's amazing.
Oh, okay. Before this whole thing happened.
Yeah, long before. When I heard about him going to DeSales, I'm like, oh my gosh, that must have been, you know, Dr. Ramsland. And then her name came up and I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it's interesting for sure. So
we'd like to kind of broaden it beyond Kohberger and follow Kohberger, keep our eye on it, but really, you know, kind of go into some other stuff, some classic true crime. Ted Bundy. You know, what's kind of interesting is that ever since Charles Manson died, a ton of books have come out about him. I guess people were afraid to write about him. I almost, but didn't do one last year on Lizzy Borden.
We did it. We did that on the podcast. Yeah, we do all solved cases on the podcast. So when I started doing these, I started doing the true current cases are fun because they're still going on. But on our podcast, we do solved cases.
But did you go to Fall River and visit that home where she did all of this?
Did not, but that would have been
we're
cool
gonna do that.
for sure. Awesome.
The place was bought by a new set of owners, and there was a miscommunication or whatever, so we never got to do that. But I plan to go down there. And I also have a old friend who writes true crime, and she's coming out with a book in the near future. So we had her on once, and when she comes out with a new book, we're going to do that. She won't even tell me what it's about, but it's I'm sure it's going to get. So yeah, we want to branch out into other stuff, other cases, go backwards to old cases, and then go forwards. By the way, let me ask you this: did Lizzy Borden do it, or didn't she do it?
I think she did.
Yeah,
I think she did.
Yeah,
I do. Yeah. I mean, it's the Occam's razor. I mean, who else could have done it? You know, I mean, we floated out all the different theories, but to me,
the old man had enemies.
Yeah,
nobody liked him. I mean, he was a Fall River businessman, and he had a lot of enemies, and people didn't like him. But there's really I'm on the fence on it. I'll be really honest. I'm on the fence on it, but you know.
Yeah, it's an interesting case for sure.
It is. It is.
Yeah, and I mean, I was getting ready to start a new book when I started doing this channel because I didn't expect it to blow up like it did. So my book is on the burner now as I start cranking out YouTube videos. So it's all right. It's all right.
Can you tell us what it's about, or are you one of those people that won't talk about your project while you're doing it?
No, it's about a serial killer in the Midwest, and it adds some supernatural elements to it. So it's a serial killer, and as he kills his victims, they show up on his body as tattoos.
Oh my God.
It's pretty intense. No, I just made it.
Oh, no, fiction.
I hope. No, it's fiction. But no, I write short stories and novels, but I did a short story collection last year, and so I'm getting ready to start another novel. So I enjoy it. It's something I've done for a long time.
And we have something else in common. We both play the bass guitar.
We do. Yeah, next time I have to have you bring your bass in, and we'll do like a bass duel or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for coming on with me today for Murder
you.
Metal Mayhem. I think it was a lot of fun to talk to you guys. Like I said, having watched your videos, I feel like I know you both. And so this was a lot of fun for me.
Same.
And I'd love to do a live with you sometime. That would be cool. I haven't done any yet, but I'd like to. So CJ is going to have me on maybe next week or the week after. So I'm going to do an interview with him as well. So I'd like to get the
We've been on with him. Yeah, he's a great
I saw
guy.
that you guys were on with him, and I'd like to get the other creators. I've reached out to Harsh, Jules of All Trades. I'm trying to get them all to do what we're doing now because I think it's a great way to network with each other and help each other out. You know, instead of being competitors, we can be friendly competitors and help each other and plug each other's channels. So
absolutely.
But I do appreciate it.
We'll be watching.
Awesome. Well, thank
you so much for having us on. It was a pleasure.
You bet. It was a lot of fun, and we'll do it again sometime.